This is going to be a little bit more of a freeform video. I don't really have a plan for this one. It's more stemming from a general idea that I've had about characters, especially in a science fiction or fantasy setting. And the way I put it is what to do when your characters go homeless. Now, what I mean by this is I've written a number of books that I've actually scrapped. There is one book in particular I'm thinking of that actually went through like 3 or 4 different incarnations before it finally snapped together. And one of the incarnations of that book had a character that I was very attached to and I thought had a lot of potential. But that character did not have their full realization in that story. There was only so far for them to go and so much for them to do. And I said, there's a mismatch here between the character and the story. I like this character, I just can't do anything with them here. So I took them out of that story and I set them aside. There they are, sitting in the back of my head. And I said, someday I'm going to find a place for them. And as the years went by and I came up with one new story idea after another, I would take that character and I would try to plug them into this story in progress and say, do they fit? How do they complement it? And this happened a few times in a row with no success until finally one day I found a hit. And it was with a story that I had previously scrapped, torn down to the studs, just the barest minimum of the original idea, and rebuilt from the ground up again. And I said, oh, I know exactly where this person is going to fit into this world. And I know exactly what they have to give to it. So the arc I'm describing is you come up with a character, they don't fit the story that they were originally devised for, and they sort of float around for a while, and then you find that they do click somewhere. But why is that the case? And the answer I've come up with is that it is about finding a character that is best suited to giving the audience some particular kind of emotional experience in a given story. It's not just that the general lay of the character is a good match for the story's plot, but if it's a good match for its tone or its intentions. So when I've had characters go homeless in the past, a lot of that has been because I realized with some difficulty that who they were and what they wanted and how they were going to get it were just not a good match for the rest of the story. Sometimes I realized that I have a character here that has a very naive, simplistic worldview. They live in a world that is far too cynical and corrupt to support a story where their worldview has a chance of surviving. And I said, that's not a good match. I'm going to be either crushing this character under the heel of the story, or I'm going to be deforming the setting and all of its implications around that character. And I think that's a mistake. So I took them apart and I set them aside and I said, we've got to find what matches whom and where. And one of the consequences of this kind of thinking is that I tend to come up with an idea for a character that does not necessarily have a setting or that is not welded immutably to any one particular setting. They may be the product of a general flavor of settings. Like, okay, this is someone from a fairly cynical setting, or this is someone from a fairly idealistic setting, or something like that. And again, because that's a fairly vague thing to say, I don't really have a place to put them. So I end up with this pool in the back of my mind of like a dozen characters with these different constitutions and these different worldviews and these different flavors to them. And they will just live in the back of my mind for a while, waiting for a story that will receive them well. And I found that with that sort of thing, I just have to be patient. That I have to let the natural process of being curious about a story develop independently of trying to crowbar any one of these people into one of those stories. Just put them next to each other. It's like speed dating almost. You know, you have one person get up, you have another person get up, they talk for 2 minutes, and if nothing clicks, then they both sit back down. But every now and then sparks will fly, good sparks. And then those two will go off and start talking somewhere. So you have to cultivate patience. And that can be really hard when you have a character who is very close to your own heart. And you feel heartbroken because they don't have a place to live. They're not getting what they deserve. I've experienced this more than a few times. And again, I found that the real key is that you cannot rush it. You cannot force it. You cannot give them something that is not organically prepared to receive them. Unless it is your intention to have a fish out of water story, which can be fun, but even there, I think that there needs to be a proper complement between the character and the setting. It's just a complement that we can't see at first. It's something that comes out as a surprise that develops over time in an intriguing way. One more point I want to make about characters going homeless is that the more freedom you give yourself to think about what the essence of this character is, the larger the possibilities are going to be for finding them a home. Like if you have a character that was originally from a modern, postmodern setting, a technological setting or something like that, and you end up isolating the core aspects of their character that aren't really part of that, their attitude towards the world, an attitude that could survive in any number of environments. That may give you a little more freedom to redeploy them in a story that you maybe originally didn't think would ever be able to receive them because of its technological level or what have you. But that's really not as important as whether or not the spirit of the story is ready to receive them. If you have somebody who is a cynic and the environment that they're in has a great deal of cynicism, and that seems like a good fit for the kind of story you want to tell, because the story is basically, it revolves around their cynicism, then that's a good match. Sometimes it can be more interesting to have a character who's cynical in a setting that is less cynical, but which could use a dose of cynicism. And sometimes you have a character who is technologically advanced, but the core of their character has nothing to do with the technological advances as such. It's something that could easily be redeployed in another setting, in another incarnation. So you do want to give yourself the freedom where you can to play freely with the way the character is constituted and how their constitution is going to match the story and give it further dimension. One last note on this from my point of view. One of the things that I found about myself is that I don't like to tell stories about the same characters over and over again. I tend to get a character in mind. I tend to give them a story where I feel everything that is important about that character and that setting can be said in one go. And then when I'm done, I close the book on both the setting and the character alike, and I say, goodbye, it was wonderful knowing you. And for me, that makes it so much more satisfying when I'm able to take one of these homeless characters and give them a home that they deserve and just send them off into the sunset, because that gives me the freedom to go look for something else totally new, something else in a completely different direction, something else that can be informed by all the growth that I derived from coming up with this character and giving them a place to go and telling their story as completely as I can. There's my take on what to do when your characters are homeless and how to fix it. And I hope this is of help to people who struggle with this thing, because I know there's more than a few of them. So until next time, stay curious.